Hello and welcome to the post-Spanish Grand Prix F1 Nation podcast. And I am Damon Hill and I'm joined by the beautiful Natalie Pinkham and also the beautiful Tom Clarkson.
Well, good morning, Damon. Good morning, TC. How are you?
I'm very well. Great to see you guys.
Is that it?
That's it. That's it.
He's got nothing left, has he, Damon? He's exhausted from the weekend.
He works very hard and he's away and he's missing his wedding anniversary, so he's feeling bad, and he's a bad father, he's a bad husband, and he's locked in a hotel room. He's so bad.
Such a positive way to start the pod, guys. Yeah, thanks. You're making me feel really good. Yes, I am still in Barcelona. I've got a nice view. I'm looking out of my hotel window at the Mediterranean. But it's very cloudy. I'm assuming it's cold. I don't know. I haven't been outside yet.
And neither are you going to, because you're stuck. You're quarantined. And I think that's just teasing, having a view like that. You can look, but you can't touch.
Pinks. The last 2 weeks, I've been in fantastic places. I've been in the Algarve. I've been on the Mediterranean. And I haven't left my hotel in either place. What have you guys been up to?
Well, I've been down in Dartmouth, which is very nice. Family weekend away. Whacking some golf balls into a valley as well, badly. Damon, I wanted to know, actually, how many golf balls is it acceptable to lose in a round?
One.
What?
Yeah, I would say mostly professional golfers try not to lose any golf balls. And the rest of us, if we lose one or two, that's not too good.
I did 3 off the first tee.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's okay. That's not bad. Oh, 3 off the first tee?
Yeah.
Oh, right. That's quite serious. Yeah. The most important thing, Natalie, is not to hurt anybody.
But right, that's true. That's true.
I'm going to shoehorn a segue back into F1
Go on.
because we're talking about golf. And we should. He did ask what we were up to.
Yeah.
And you actually guessed that I would be the last podcast, which I wasn't involved with. You guessed I'd be hitting golf balls. I was listening to the podcast on the driving range with my AirPods in and listening to that fabulous French journalist, whose name I forgot. But Tom, he was fantastic, wasn't he? Gave us a bit of insight there.
Julian Billot. Does F1 Nation improve your golf? Is this a selling point of the pod?
Yeah, well, I think it did actually. It sort of distracted me. But, I mean, we're digressing off of the main subject, which is, of course, our amazing sport, Formula One.
It's lights out and away we go, and I think Verstappen got a slightly better start than Lewis Hamilton. Verstappen goes into turn 1 and goes past the Mercedes.
Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, they are absolutely flying. Oh, he's pitting.
So,
wow.
Mercedes committing then to the two-stop strategy and pitting right now.
How far have I got to catch up? Currently 22 seconds. We've done it before.
I don't see how we're going to make it to the end.
Hamilton goes round the outside at turn 1 and the charge is complete, and it's the checkered flag as the winner of the Spanish Grand Prix for Lewis Hamilton.
Get in there, Lewis. What a great drive, man.
Great job with the strategy. Definitely have to work for it, but that was great. Absolutely great.
Lewis Hamilton, what about that? I mean, 100 pole positions.
The most talented man to have walked the earth. Who said that?
Yeah, that's what I said.
That was a great quote.
I thought I like to compete with the hyperbole, so I think I won that one. I made it. For those who aren't aware, I tweeted a rather stupendous tweet about Lewis Hamilton's 100th pole position, and I said he's the most talented person. I said you do realise, of course, you're looking at one of the most talented people ever to have walked the earth, and of course, in a racing car, he is. I mean, who can deny that? I mean, it is unbelievable.
Oh. Listen, I totally agree. And when you put it into context, when you think about those 100 poles and you consider the great Michael Schumacher only, I say in inverted commas, managed 68, Ayrton Senna 65, and then the closest within Lewis's field has only managed, he can still add to it because he's still racing, 57, Sebastian Vettel. It just makes you realise the astonishing achievement that we are witnessing. And I think we will look back in many years' time and tell our grandchildren and great-grandchildren how lucky we were to have been there at the time.
Yeah.
Damon, Lewis replied to your tweet in the post-race press conference yesterday. And
now, Tom, who put that question? Did you pop that question to him? Because I was a bit shocked to read that this morning.
I didn't put it to him, but what did amuse me is that he didn't actually deny it. He didn't deny.
He didn't modestly
He said,
go,
"Thank you, Damon." And you,
no, he just accepted it.
Just one for Lewis. Yesterday, Damon Hill tweeted about you that you're one of the most talented people to have ever walked the earth.
Well, firstly, I saw that yesterday, and I felt so much gratitude to Damon, because I remember growing up watching Damon and having, as I do now, so much respect for him. And I remember rooting for him, as a Brit, wanting him to succeed, even when he didn't have a great car or a good team. So it's definitely humbling when you see people that you've admired, you've watched and grown up, kind of taking inspiration from or whatever it may be, and having them say respectful things and positive things like that. That's an amazing moment when that happens.
He's in his majesty at the moment. I think we're seeing Lewis totally in command of his art.
And he's enjoying it so much. Listen, whenever you talk to him in the pen afterwards, it's always easy to interview him when he's won because he's beaming, and it's harder when he's sort of beating himself up or frustrated with his weekend. But he's just got such a spring in his step. He was able to compliment Max Verstappen on his great start. I mean, he did also add that he was perhaps hanging back slightly to give Bottas a toe. But the bottom line is he's loving this battle, isn't he? It's bringing out the very best in him.
I completely agree. I think he's needed this for a long time. He's needed someone to come to him. It's like Goliath, that story of Goliath, isn't it? He stands there beating his chest going, right, who is going to kind of tackle me? Who's going to take me on? The great champions need someone they can spar with, someone they can actually measure themselves against. And Max has obviously been much exalted and praised. And I think, Jensen in our coverage on Sky, he did say that he thought that Max was more naturally talented. And I think all these things just give Lewis more satisfaction when he prevails. So the harder you push this guy, I think Lewis has been on tick over for a long time. And I think it's been too easy. And that's why he hasn't got the recognition, I think, that he deserves. And I think this year, Max has he's taken the challenge, but he's also shown that it's not as easy as it looks when you get to the sharp end.
He was, of course, on the back foot at the start with Verstappen making such a great start and then able to fight back for that win. He talked about it being a gamble to go for that bold strategy, the extra pit stop. I don't know if gamble is quite the right word because I think there's so much respect and trust within the team. You can make those kind of decisions when you truly trust your driver. It doesn't feel like you're taking a risk.
Yeah. And I love the way he sort of came on and said, I don't think that, at some point, I don't think these tyres are going to get to the end. And Pete Mornington said, I think they'll be better than Max's. That was brilliant.
Red Bull, I think, will be scratching their heads about that race because we've seen enough of these two cars this year to know a little bit of their strengths and weaknesses. The Red Bull uses up its rear tyres more than the Mercedes. The Mercedes is easier on its tyres, both front and rear. So it was odd that it was Red Bull going for the one-stop strategy yesterday in the Grand Prix. And in a way, they were on the back foot right from the start of the weekend because they didn't give themselves another set of medium tyres in the race because they used them all up beforehand. So they were kind of forced down a route that they really didn't want to go on. And they even made it harder for themselves by using a lower downforce rear wing. They ran a high downforce wing in Friday practice and decided to take it off because they thought they'd be sitting ducks down that long pit straight. And so they took it off and ran less rear wing. But of course, that makes the rear tyre deg even worse. So they kind of created a situation that played into Mercedes' hands. So yes, Mercedes were brilliant. But I think Red Bull made it a little bit easier for them than they would like to have done. Agree?
Yeah, I think we're going to just talk about this a little bit because it's important because it is the World Championship we're looking at here. We're looking at the battle, and it's evolved into more than just a battle between drivers. It really is an interesting battle between the two teams and the way they approach it. There's no doubt now that you've got backup drivers. You've got Bottas and you've got Perez now, and Perez has got to lift his game a little bit to help Red Bull out of the situation because there was tactically that he could have been more useful if he'd qualified further up. So Red Bull will be looking at their weaknesses. But
I think that will come. That will come
soon. No,
he's just not quite comfortable in the car yet, is he? I mean, to still pull it up to P5 was a strong result for him. But you're right, it has to come soon.
No, I agree. I mean, I'm a big Perez fan, and he'll get there. But it's harder in the Red Bull team for the not lead driver to match Max. So we'll see him make his progress. But what we're watching is this tactical battle, and it's interesting how the second drivers are key to that battle as well, and how the teams are deploying these tactics. So yesterday's race was a pure tactical race. It was fascinating from that point of view.
So Damon, in your mind, could Red Bull have done anything differently? I want to understand this mindset that, ultimately, if Max had pitted sooner, or indeed again, is it this idea of just never surrendering track position, particularly at a circuit like Barcelona?
I mean, there was a couple of things to mention. One was there was a safety car. Tsunoda's car broke down. So that basically gave them extra length on their first stint, didn't it? So the strategy that they had to include the taking into calculation the extra thing. So Lewis went longer on his first stint. Now, could Max have basically gone for the two-stop? If he'd come in that bit earlier, he might have been better to go, because he'd just basically given himself a massively long middle stint. And that was always on paper looking a bit doubtful. What do you think, Tom?
Well, Mercedes thought Red Bull were going to pull the trigger first on a two-stop strategy. They thought that Red Bull were going to go for a short middle stint on the soft tyre. Remember, they didn't have two sets of the medium. They thought they'd do a short middle stint on the soft and then put the medium on at the end. And so that when they didn't do it, they thought, right, we're going to do it. And so they ended up pulling the trigger first. But it all smacks a little bit of Red Bull being a little bit championship battle rusty, I think. They haven't done it since 2013. And the relentless pressure that comes with a championship, I think you do forget how to do it, don't you? I mean, do you? Damon, you've been there.
I think they looked a little bit flat-footed, actually, to be honest, Red Bull. You're right, I would say. But they will go away and they will be really hard on themselves, as they always are. But I mean, I'm quite surprised, a little bit surprised by Max's equilibrium. He seems, either he's putting a very good act on it, or underneath he is extremely upset, because I think, he knows the clock is ticking. He knows this is a slim chance, but it's a chance of a championship. And it's slipping away already. So I'm quite surprised by his equilibrium. When you hear him talking, he's saying it's not all. I'm not too unhappy with the situation. He must be. Surely he is. 14
points is a chunk, and when every point counts, and you can tell that because they're all desperate for that fastest lap, aren't they?
Yeah.
Tom, I'm interested to know how the dynamic is evolving, changing, if you like, between Max and Lewis, particularly after this weekend just gone. Obviously, Damon and I weren't there, but let us know what you made of it.
I think it's turned up a notch, actually, Pinks. Throw our minds back 7 days to Portugal. Lewis has just won the race. Max is second. They come into the press conference room and there's a stall in the middle of the room. And Lewis sort of drapes himself, lying on his back, over this stool just to stretch his back after the race. And Max is sort of wanting to come over and help him stretch. And it's all very, it's wonderful behind the scenes chance to see their relationship up close. And it was all very easy after that race. Fast forward 7 days to yesterday in the Spanish Grand Prix, much more of an edge in the room. And I think it had there were various trigger points for that. One is turn one. For the second time in 3 races, Max has really lent on Lewis at turn one, and Lewis has had to take avoiding action to stop them colliding. And I think when Lewis was saying after the race, I learnt a lot about the way Max was driving. I think that was direct reference to what happened at turn one, in that this guy is so ruthless and he's a total pain in the ass. But it also just everything about they weren't looking at each other. They were just much more of an edge. And it's like, okay, we're 4 races in. Yes, there's still 19 to go, but suddenly this is now. We're getting into the meat and veg of this championship now, and it's with every race that's rolling past, the gap is getting a little bigger, and it's just wonderful to see this edge. But there's definitely more of an edge now. That would be my take. Have you seen it as well, Pinks?
I mean, I haven't been there for the last 2 races, so it is difficult. The overriding feeling I've always got is the respect, and is the fact that Lewis is just loving the challenge that Max is bringing. And Max, I feel, has matured a lot recently. His home life is settled. He's got great support. He's got a quicker car. He's ticking lots of boxes in terms of being in the right headspace to take on this championship. But he just seems very calm. I mean, I don't know. I think there's mutual respect. But you're right. Probably the competition will just start cranking up all the more. And frustrations may start to come in. But right now, I think that they just respect each other too much for there ever to be a fallout. And you'll play this back to me and it won't age well in 3 races' time when they're fisticuffs in the pen.
I don't think there'll be that. There is the respect. I just definitely sense it. Just with each race that's rolling by, it means a little more.
I'm sure, yeah.
And when Max continually puts Lewis off the track at turn 1, it's getting bloody annoying for him, I think.
Yeah, but exciting for us.
I was going to say, listening to you talking about it made me think about how Nico beat Lewis. And the way Nico beat Lewis was to needle him. And
under his skin.
And make life unpleasant. And Lewis doesn't like that. He likes everything to be nice and sweet. And, you know, I think Lewis is a lot tougher and more experienced now. But I think that Max doesn't look to me like he's playing games out of the car. I mean, he definitely is aggressive in the car. And the car they've got now gets off the line brilliantly. So Mercedes will be definitely not counting on getting to the corner first, even if they're on pole and Max is second. But he muscled through on lap 1, didn't he? He put his car in a compromised position. Lewis could have collided with him. He had to duck out of it. But that was like a punch to the gut, wasn't it, on the first lap? But of course, Lewis got him in the long run.
I wanted to move it on to Bottas and didn't want to yield to Hamilton, ultimately costing Lewis a second and a half. That didn't matter in the whole scheme of things, but it was just quite an interesting moment, wasn't it? He said after the race that he could have led him by sooner, but he was focusing on his own race. And Damon, you know, I can only imagine just how gutting it is as a racer to have to move over for your teammate. It just must feel all wrong.
Nobody likes to hear that. The guy behind you is faster. You know, your teammate is faster. All those things are just the worst thing you want to have on the radio. And also, it's the worst thing his engineer wants to have to tell him. You know, because they feel crestfallen too. They don't want to tell their driver, sorry, you know, mate, you're going to have to accept second place here. But he cost Lewis nearly a second. If it had come down to a last lap battle, you know, that second was really valuable. I watched that bit and I thought Toto must be absolutely fuming at Bottas after this. But he did, he looked a bit, what's the word, sort of contrite after the race, didn't he, Bottas? He didn't look...
Toto must understand, mustn't he? I mean, you know, Lewis was quick to say afterwards, we are the best of teammates. Well, it's okay to say that now because it didn't ultimately cost you the win. But it does just about work, doesn't it?
I don't think it was too bad for Bottas. He'd lost so much time behind Leclerc in that first stint of the race. I think he knew that he was no longer in the running. I think if he'd been running in Lewis's wheel tracks for that first stint, and then they'd done a different thing with Lewis strategy-wise, that would have been harder. But I feel in his mind, his race was gone anyway because of that first stint.
And do you feel like he thinks his season's gone already? He seems incredibly flat at the moment. I read something today that he's lost more points to Lewis already in the first 4 races than Vettel did in the whole of 2016, something like 47 points.
But let's not forget, Pinks, that this is Lewis's best ever start to a Formula One season. This is the closest it's been in terms of performance, and yet those 94 points from 4 races is the greatest tally he's had. It's extraordinary.
Wow, that really
No,
is.
it is. I think that's a complete, you know, that's a hoisting a flag up a pole, isn't it? I mean, he has decided he's not going to do what he normally does, which is kind of gently through the season build up some points and then press on just after the summer break to get it in the bag so he can then knock off before winter and go on holiday. You know, that's normally what he does. So it looks like he's going for the kill now. And
yeah, but he's been able to get away with doing that in the past, as you say. And now he has to raise his game.
Yeah.
Guys, we're seeing Mercedes at the peak of their powers. It's something that I'm not sure we've seen in the hybrid era because it's been such an intra-team battle among their drivers. In a way, this is the first time that we're seeing, you know, Mercedes at 100%. We had Paddy Lowe on the Beyond the Grid podcast the other day, and he was saying that back in 2014, they were having to do things like turn down the engine because they were so far ahead of the opposition. They thought that if they gave it full beans, people would just change the regs to slow them down. So they were having to do all those silly little tricks, really, to make it seem closer than it was. Whereas now we're seeing Mercedes all guns blazing, and it's something. It's a marvel. It's something to behold.
I got a chance to ask Toto when I was laughed out. I can't remember what race it was. No, it was Romagna, the Imola race, and I was going to ask him a long question, but we had a commercial break coming up, so I couldn't get the whole question out. But I asked him. I said, "How do you deal with? How is the team dealing with fatigue? Because you've been at the sharp end for so long. We've seen people leaving, but this is incredible the way they've responded. Because the start of the season, it looked like they were pulling their hair out and it was all doom and gloom, but there's no way they haven't responded brilliantly, and Lewis has been kicking them up the backside in a nice way and saying, come on guys, we need a bit more. And then he thanked him after the race, didn't he, in very noticeably after the Spanish Grand Prix. So, but Bottas was hit before this race with questions about whether or not he'd be there all season, and I think Toto had to come out. So Bottas is getting it's the worst thing in the world to be second to the best driver in the world. And I have to say, having raced against Michael Schumacher, although I'd be coming second and sometimes winning races, basically I was the first guy to get beaten by Michael Schumacher. So I got all the rubbish that gets thrown at you if you get beaten, and he's getting it, and it's hard because his performance is of the very highest standard. It just isn't up to Lewis's standard.
I feel so sorry for him, really, because he's doing a brilliant job.
No, hang on one second, TC. We had this conversation at the weekend, me and my mate, and we were talking about how we feel sorry for certain drivers. And then we go, hang on a minute, do we really feel sorry for them? They are at the pinnacle of motorsport, living the dream, doing the ultimate job in the world and getting paid tens of millions to do so. So don't feel too sorry for them.
Well, on that level, you're bang on right. But it's just really awkward, isn't it, when you're just being questioned the whole time. And quite bluntly.
But isn't that just part of it, Damon? Isn't that just part of the sport? Isn't that part of any industry when you're at the very top?
I think it's a byproduct of what we're doing now. It's a byproduct of the media and the relentless hunger for some sort of story or something to be writing about. So with my day, it wasn't. We didn't have internet and all the rest of it. Well, we had internet, but we didn't have social media. So
not that old.
we had electricity, and it would just come out with gas. Right? But we had. The press conference. And now the press conference, as Tom knows full well, goes on all day with every driver. And oh my God, the questions these drivers have to put up with time and time again. And, feeling sorry for them, you're right. You can't feel sorry for someone who, it's a cost, it's a price, it's what they're paid to do. But there comes a point where they're human beings. And, after a bit, you're just being mean to someone, aren't you, if you keep asking them horrible questions?
And it's so blunt, the questioning now, because no one is in the room. It's all done via Zoom. And Valtteri, will you be at Mercedes next year? How can he answer that? I hope to be there next year. I'm going as hard as I can. I've just had pole last weekend in Portugal. And
he should just say, listen, if you're going to ask me whether I'm going to be here, then I'm not going to answer the question, and we'll go on to the next question. So you can do that.
You can't say that. You can't say I'm not going to answer that.
Yes, you can.
That just gives. You're just feeding meat to the lions then, aren't you?
I remember once there was obviously lots of lovely things have been said about the great Murray Walker, but he used to come to me with the BBC or ITV or whatever it was, and he'd come and ask me questions after I'd lost and been beaten by Michael Schumacher. And I wanted to clock him, and I was thinking, this is like I'm admitting to wanting to hit an old man, a nice old man. That's how you can't. He has to ask the question. Yeah. People want to know. He has to ask the question. But he asked it in such a lovely way that you didn't get But I didn't like the question at all. No. There's no question about that. It's a tough business to be in the spotlight, but they're not public servants. You can pound a politician, but these people aren't necessarily answerable to the journalists. They don't have to answer their questions. They don't work for the journalists. They work for the team.
Yeah.
But there was an interesting subplot to all this, is that I think there were people within Mercedes who think that Red Bull are stirring it and placing those questions with journalists. Yeah, just to sort of Red Bull's efforts to try and destabilise Mercedes. I don't know if that's true, but
yes, you do.
I know that certainly.
Come on, you live in the press office. What about that? I mean, what about the weaving? Because there was some interesting moves, I thought. And a year ago, I watched the Spanish Grand Prix and I spoke to Ross Brawn and I said, listen, are you concerned about the closing speed of these cars with a high downforce circuit and the DRS? Because what happens is you've got a high wing and you've got a long straight. And once you open that DRS, the thing catapults forward and accelerates past these cars. And it's going way faster than the car it's overtaking. And then this year, again, we saw some pretty close calls, I thought. Late moves. But of course, the driver in front has got a car approaching it at such an increased speed because of the DRS. And I think it was worrying. And I think there were a couple of moves I saw and I just thought, maybe it's a good thing we don't have spectators down at the first corner because...
Well, a bit like my golf ball situation.
Very like that, yes. Yeah, they're much more expensive, these cars, than golf balls.
And potentially more damaging.
Yeah, and there's a person sitting inside of one.
Yes, exactly.
Damon, it's a sort of karting mentality, isn't it? I think when you're karting, these guys are all weaving all over the road, do anything to keep the guy behind. And it needs to be knocked out of them by the time they get to Formula One, doesn't it?
I think it's a specific problem related to the DRS, in actual fact. I think it's because the acceleration due to the DRS being opened and then getting in the tow, the car behind is passing at such a much higher rate. And it's nearly always just before the braking zone. So it's maximum speed. And if one guy hits the braking zone, just before the person has judged it. And we saw obviously a great move with Carlos Sainz, who was approaching his old teammate, and he kind of guessed what Lando was going to do. Lando classically late minute jink to the right to try and block off the right, but Carlos had to quickly adjust himself. A fraction of a second wrong, and then that's a car launched over the top of another. And if you look at the Indy, racing at 200 miles an hour all the time, that is verboten. Last minute moves like that on a car going that fast is not what you do in Indianapolis. And these guys are going Indianapolis speeds now.
But how much of a purist are you guys? I mean, do we like DRS? Are we saying that actually we think we should do away with DRS for safety reasons? Or
I don't like DRS. I thought maybe at first it was a kind of neat gadget to have it, but I have to say I don't like it. I think what they need to do is increase braking distances.
It would have made for a really exciting end to that race yesterday without DRS, because it would have been that much harder for Hamilton to get past, wouldn't it?
Exactly. It was a piece. I mean, Max didn't even try to defend, did he? He just sat there and just knew it was over.
And again, I think a lot of it does come down to trust. And I think the reason it worked for Sainz and Norris is because there is an innate understanding between them. But my heart was absolutely in my mouth. I mean, it was a moment, wasn't it?
Okay, guys, you obviously love podcasts and you love our podcast, but there's another podcast coming. It's called F1 on the Edge. And it's about all the stories that make up this incredible sport. And here's a little clip for you to get a little bit of a taste for it.
In Formula One, everything is on the edge.
Being on the edge is where you want to live in any race car.
Mystery, danger, secrets, fights. On and off the racetrack, there's drama at every turn.
Adrenaline was pumping like you can't believe. This is the bombshell that's going to go off.
F1 on the Edge, a podcast telling incredible, true Formula One stories. Like what really happened to a $300,000 diamond lost in a crash during the Monaco Grand Prix.
It's somewhere. It can't just have disappeared. Somebody knows where this is.
I think enough time has passed now for me to confess.
Plus, a legendary champion kidnapped by rebels.
3 operatives, one has the getaway car. One of them pulls a gun and says, "Do what we say, nothing will happen to you."
And the Formula One icon, enraged by a rookie.
Ayrton Senna appears at the door, and all of a sudden, he just launched himself across the room and started hitting Eddie.
Drivers, F1 insiders, and other eyewitnesses will tell these stories and more, like you've never heard before. F1 on the Edge, a Spotify original podcast series produced by Formula One. Follow F1 on the Edge and listen for free, exclusively on Spotify. Listen to episode 1, Monaco's Lost Diamond, from Wednesday the 19th of May.
talk actually about some improved performances on the grid this weekend. Charles Leclerc, I thought, had an incredible weekend, a real step forward for Ferrari. And I think that improvement in quali pace was then crucially translated over to the race, which often hasn't happened in 2020, for example. But real spring in his step. I mean, what are your thoughts, Damon, on how he's developing as a driver?
Well, I don't think he's developing so much as kind of cementing what we knew, or we thought we knew about Charles Leclerc. He is a top driver, and his race pace is fantastic as well, and he's qualifying well, probably slightly better than the car. I think you have to say his performances in qualifying have been on occasions exceptional. Was it Imola or was it Portugal? I can't remember where he qualified. Anyway, I think it was actually Bahrain, wasn't it, where he qualified where people didn't expect the car to be.
Damon, I don't understand this qualifying better than the car. How can you do that?
But he does.
You can't
But he
do
does,
that,
and I think he did it all through last year as well. He outperformed the car, dragged the car to places that we didn't expect, and that point was emphasised all the more when you saw where Vettel qualified all through last year.
Don't get all pedantic with me, Tom. You know what I mean. These guys, they pull out something.
Yes.
Okay, what we should say is, I think what we should say is, from their own performance point of standards, they got absolutely 100% out of themselves, and they dragged the car along with them to do it. And I think Senna was one of those. You gave a bad car to Senna, and he'd just rag it to the last drop out of it, and he beat the car. So there are some drivers who kind of stay within the boundary of the car a little bit, and that's why Charles Leclerc is clearly a world champion in waiting. But and I'm not saying that Carlos Sainz is not, because I think he's done brilliantly well as well to slot in there and put some pressure on and perform well.
And it seemed that McLaren were quite surprised at the pace of the Ferrari, that actually it was, for at least this weekend just gone, it was clearly the third fastest car on the grid.
That's the point, isn't it, Pinks? I think is that, yes, Charles Leclerc got the maximum out of it in qualifying, which we've seen him do many times before, but then the race pace of the car is just not there because it's been burning through its rear tyres, whereas the race pace was more in keeping with the qualifying pace at Barcelona. So suddenly they did take a step forward, and I think it is meaningful, isn't it? Because Barcelona has always set the tone in the past for the rest of the season. They always say if you have a car that's quick around Barcelona, you're going to go well pretty much everywhere.
But Barcelona, it's like being on a wind tunnel. The cars are constantly cornering and one arc, and they're always in the aero zone. So basically, for us, it's not a good track for Formula One cars. For motorbikes, it's different because they can get close to a bike in a corner, not a car.
The only thing I would say to counter that is that it is a demanding circuit that's got a bit of everything. So if you do well there, no, Damon's shaking his head. I feel as if Ferrari can take real heart from the progress they made at Barcelona, because then perhaps that can be borne out at different circuits as well.
I don't know how many laps I've done around Barcelona. Honestly,
I haven't. I know how many I've done. 0. I know, actually, I did one with Ant Davidson, but I wasn't driving.
It's not a circuit where you can, as a driver, extract a lot. That's the point. It's pretty much set by the car's performance. The car is the limit. Clearly there's drivers who are really, really good, and having to manage tyres and stuff like that, their talent will make a difference. And that will always be the case. But more than anything, it's a circuit that just is limited by the car's performance.
What you learn most about at Barcelona now is the slow corner speed of the cars, because turn 3, that long right-hander, easy flat. The cars are producing so much grip. Then if turn 9 is easy flat. So actually, the only corners where you're making a difference now is through all the slow stuff. So it's a really good indicator for Monaco. And Mercedes were unbelievably fast through Sector 3. So they're going to look really good in Monaco probably. But so it's interesting from an engineer's perspective. They're looking at the slow corner pace of the car around Barcelona, despite the number of high-speed corners. It's all a bit of a contradiction. But
we saw a bit of a tide turn, didn't we, with Lando dominating Ricciardo. That was a bit of a bounce back for Daniel Ricciardo.
Yeah, and he needed it, didn't he? His best weekend for McLaren, yeah. Feels like he's got his mojo back. I mean, I think the thing is, I'm not sure his mojo ever really went. He obviously had that massively disappointing quali last time out. And then he needed to come back from that fast. But when you look at the stats, he's still 3-1 out-qualified Lando in his first 4 races at a team. I mean, that's really impressive when you consider how much you do need to adapt, as we've talked about before on this podcast, when you join a new team.
And I think it was nice for him in a way that McLaren made a bit of a mess of qualifying. They've completely held their hand up, but he didn't get his final run in Q3 because they timed it wrong and he just didn't cross the line in time. So, yes, he's come in for a bit of criticism recently. Why are you taking so long to get up to speed? Blah, blah, blah. But actually, when the team drops the ball as well, I feel he's probably thinking, all right, we've all had our moments. Let's now move on together. It's a sort of, this might be the line in the sand for him where he really comes good, and he loves Monaco, doesn't he? So it might be the place where he really pushes the distance on his teammate.
Well, there's a question for you, Damon. He loves Monaco. How much does it matter to a driver when it's almost self-fulfilling prophecy? You've gone well there before, therefore you're boosted psychologically before you turn up there again, and therefore you can repeat the feat.
I think there's a correlation between how much a person loves the kind of circuit and how well they do there. I think some people, for whatever reason, love Monaco and go really well there. I would say Brundle went well at Monaco. He performed, even despite having a massive shunt there and permanently damaging his ankles. I think he did well there. And Lacey was always Monaco. He loved it. Senna clearly loved it. Certain types of driver take to this place, and we saw Lacey leading the race in Villeneuve's Ferrari, didn't we? In the classic Monaco recently, and getting stuffed into the wall by the bloke behind him. But he clearly was loving it. And years have gone by, but I'm not sure Lewis loves Monaco. That is going to be interesting next week. I would say Max is probably slightly got the edge going into that race. And yes, you're right, Daniel Ricciardo, fantastic, takes to it, will go well there again. Yeah.
What kind of driver goes well at Monaco, though?
Mika Hakkinen, shall we say that Mika as well? Rubens Barrichello used to go well. So I think what they're good at is getting the car to move on throttle from the apex to the exit, because you need to get that bit right. You can barrel in. Barreling in is quite... It's really have to be careful going in to the corners, because you get the going in bit wrong and then the out bit is ding. It's basically a massive break prang. I mean, one of the most incredible laps I've seen around there was Roberto Kubica's qualifying laps. Absolutely terrifying through the chicane section to watch. Really, really committed. But Robert Kubica. But he's not Roberto, is he? I keep calling him
Roberto Moreno.
No, Robert. But I think that these guys are really good at, and maybe it's a karting thing. I'm sure, in fact, it's a karting thing. It's about that business of getting the car to go in and just get it tweaked before the apex so they can get on the power early. Oh, I just clapped then. That was me clapping.
And it's a confidence thing, isn't it? You get it right once, you get it right again, and you build and you build and you bed in over the weekend, and that confidence grows through the practice sessions. And actually, I find it quite interesting when we were talking about Max, because I think that initially, certainly earlier in his career, Monaco, he wobbled a bit there, didn't he? He made a mistake in exactly the same place that he had done the year before in a practice session. So I think something gets into your mind, into your psyche. But obviously Max is over that now. But it's kind of unique in that respect, isn't it?
Well, can you imagine going straight on at the first corner of Saint-Devote? I mean, that was a big shunt, wasn't it? So, Max had a few big dings, but I think he's made of tough stuff, so I don't think that'll hold him back too much.
Now Yuki Tsunoda. I mean, he is still my favourite subject of every race weekend, but you feel like it's a very steep learning curve that he's climbing up and slipping down a few times, and to blame your team and to be that vocal. I mean, the part of me quite liked the honesty and the rawness of it, and the fact it wasn't a media manufactured answer. But you can't really do that, can you, Damon?
No, I think you can do that if you're paying. If you're an F3 and F2 and you're paying, you can actually criticise. But when you're in F1, you're not often paying for your drive. You're actually working for these guys who are paying, like Honda, I think, are probably putting a lot of money in for Yuki. But Yeah, he overstepped the line, didn't he? And he got a bit of a ticking off. I heard from Martin and also from Jensen saying that it's not how you behave, son, in F1. It's different now, and there's so much more to learn. This is part of the new guys. There's so much more to learn, and it's a life lesson. Is what it is. Once it's not about driving anymore. Once you get to F1, it's a lot of little life lessons, and all of them have to go through it. Jensen was a master at it. He never said anything controversial. You know, he made sure he didn't create a rod for his own back. And some people learn the hard way. They offend people. And man, I have to hold my hand up and say I did the same thing. I remember once I got off a plane in Adelaide and I'd been wound up by Barry Sheen on the way over saying, Williams aren't paying you enough money. You should be getting more money. And I stupidly listened to him. And the moment I got off the plane, I met Murray Walker, who'd come to interview me as I landed for this championship showdown. And I launched into, I'm not getting paid enough. That was not a good way to motivate the team. It's not a good way. And when I walked into the garage, there was Patrick Head, and he was going, what's all this about not being paid enough? You know, suddenly you have to face everyone in the team who suddenly thinks, who the hell do you think you are? And, you know, it affects everyone you work for.
Of course it does. And you just can't go public, can you? With any of this stuff, it's got to stay internal and thrash it out behind the scenes, because once it's out there you can't ever pull it back.
Damn it, you can't pull it back. And so you can say sorry, which he did. No, Yuki said sorry, came out and he said I'm sorry. I couldn't quite understand what he was saying. He talks quite quickly, but I got the idea he was sorry.
And there are a lot of bleeps as well, Damon. It's quite sweary.
Well, that's the first thing you do when you learn English. You learn the swear words. Come on.
Also, poor Yuki. He said, it's as if the team's not giving me the same equipment. I'm sure they are.
Yeah.
But of course, the second part of that.
They'll be giving him different equipment now.
For all the swearing and all the slagging of the team, he is really funny. And that came across on Thursday when he was asked by a fan, what's the best thing about being a Formula One driver? And he said this.
I really like the food and the hospitality. I really enjoying those food. Every hospitality, like for example, AlphaTauri and Honda is really different. Japanese food in Honda and Italian food in Scuderia AlphaTauri. So I can enjoy those two different kind of food in 1 week or 1 day. So for me, it's most good thing for me in the.
I have a feeling if I'm going to eat as much as you can roll me through the paddock.
It's good.
Well, Damon, I have to say, one of the bad things about COVID in Formula One is we don't get any free food anymore. We used to be able to wander in and out of the hospitality units and enjoy ourselves.
Picking our way through the paddock, the amount of rubbish I've eaten. And not rubbish, it's lovely food, but I'm just
it's incredible
stuffing
food.
My face up and down the pit lane.
Yeah. And now you're in the middle of the paddock drilling rain. You can't even get a cup of tea to warm up.
Oh, it's awful, isn't it? I mean, you do feel such a scrounger as well. You walk in with your microphone and everything and you sit down and go, can I have some of that?
Yeah.
Oh, another cappuccino, please. Thank you.
You have to set yourself a target of not gaining more than 5 kilos each season, don't you? Otherwise, it's all going to go pear-shaped.
Like your bottom. Pear-shaped.
Hey, Damon, how is your bottom, actually? Because you've been riding a bike, haven't you?
We're not going back to manscaping already, are we?
No, I wrote, as you asked earlier about what I did, what happened on the weekend, what I've been doing. So on Sunday, I have to admit, I didn't watch the Spanish Grand Prix live because I was on a bicycle. And so it was all about hundreds, wasn't it? 100th race for Max, 100th pole for Lewis. And I was doing 100 miles through Hampshire. And it was lovely, lovely, beautiful countryside. Unfortunately, it was slightly windy and it's 100 miles. And by about 60 miles in, my backside was sore. But it was all in a good cause. It's a charity that I've been raising money for with lots of other people who we basically used to do before COVID. We did this ride through from London to Portsmouth, get on a ferry, go to St Malo, and then ride from St Malo to Caen in a day, which is 120 miles, get on a ferry, come back, Portsmouth, ride to Guildford. And it's called the Halo 250, but it's been cancelled. And the Halo charity is a learning disabilities charity, which I may have talked about before, which we helped set up. So we couldn't do it. So the guys that organised the ride came up with the Festival of Cycling. So we just said, look, if you ride 250 miles in a certain amount of time, then we'll count that towards our charity fundraising. So it's all on the Virgin Money Giving fund page. So if you go to my Twitter stuff and my Instagram, you'll find the link, and you can donate if you like, or go and join in and just cycle 250 miles in a nice easy week or two. instead of 3 days.
Brilliant. It's brilliant, Damon. Well done. Fantastic. And I have to say, your knees looked fabulous.
Aren't they great? I mean, they were out all day yesterday. I was going to wear leggings, but I thought, no, it's
No, the world needs to see the knobbly knees. A man who's probably, on a par with knees as knobbly as mine.
Yeah, well, I don't agree with that, naturally, one bit.
Mine are too knobbly.
You haven't got the bandy legs. I look like one of those, that tea advert with the chimpanzees on bicycles. I look like one of them. You're too young to remember that.
I'm just thinking about you with your bandy legs. Brilliant. A quick word on Gasly, because I find it so strange that in this modern era of Formula One, that somebody can make a mistake that is so costly to their race, a 5-second penalty, by being outside of their box at the start. Now, I know it's all about pushing it right to the limit and getting the very last millimetre that you can, but that's such a basic error, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I was saying to my wife, can I mention my wife? I always ask Georgie when I'm watching a race, I go, okay, what do you think about that? Because she's so wise. And anyway, she said, well, that was. What do you think? So I said, these are the little details that you obsess about as a racing driver. And not parking in the box. Have they got? I mean, probably. How did he do that? How did he miss his box? It's such a shame. But imagine you're fighting for the world. It's okay if you're like down the grid somewhere, not the end of the world. But if you're fighting for a world championship and you park outside the box, well, I mean, that's not going to do you much good, is it? That's the way you got to think about it as an F1 driver. Everything is for a world championship.
Everything counts.
Franz Tost so angry after the race that he wouldn't even give a quote for the press release. It's so sad, isn't it? Because that car was so good during pre-season testing, and we all thought, AlphaTauri are really going to deliver this year, and yet they've just been on the fringe of points, haven't they, at each race? And there's just been a sort of catalogue of errors, really.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not about performance. It's been about mistakes, small, silly mistakes that have all added up. Yeah. Who was he angry with, incidentally? Was it with Gasly? Was it with the team? Or was it with the response of the FIA to give a 5-second penalty?
I don't know. Couldn't get within 100 yards of him, Pinks. But I think it was just everything. Yuki slagging the team. Then, of course, him retiring with whatever issue it was, and then Gasly throwing points away by doing the error at the start, and it's just one thing after another. And if you look back at the races, Imola starting the race on the wet tyre, Yuki having a crash there, him running into the back of Daniel in Bahrain, and then last weekend just not optimising the car. It's just frustrating as hell.
I think also, Tom, you have to factor in Alpine, don't you? Because they've actually done a lot better than people. People had them written off before this. This is where you just cannot go on winter testing. We don't, so much expectation was built up. Yuki goes out, never been in F1 before. He's up there, right up there after winter testing. But he's been using his DRS virtually everywhere. So you can fool yourself and you can raise expectations beyond where they really should be. And then all you can do from after that is fall down. And that's where we are now with AlphaTauri. They are basically back where they are, and they've got to come to terms with that.
And he can cheer himself up by just popping back to hospitality for some free food.
Yeah, lovely.
Yuki.
Yeah.
No, I was talking about Franz. Go and join Yuki in hospitality.
Franz just eats toast.
Hey.
God.
He runs very fast. I ran the track on Thursday night. There was a Wings for Life run.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
And Franz, really good runner. He steamed past all of us going down to turn 1.
Maybe you're just very slow.
Well, no, it got better after that though. We all then steamed past him going up the hill.
Oh.
That's what happens when you get older, Tom. Definitely, that's the hills.
I thought it was a strategic error. He went too hard too soon. Bit like you yesterday, by the sounds of it, Damon.
Yeah. It was a good Grand Prix. I actually loved every minute of watching it. I loved watching. There was a brilliant interview that Martin did with Lewis about his pole positions on Sky, which was really interesting.
Quali masterclass,
and
yeah,
he was
I enjoyed that.
Yeah, there was that brilliant statistic from Chauvelin, I think it was actually, who told Toto that if you put all of Lewis Hamilton's pole positions together and watch them as a show, it would go on for over 2 hours. Now, think about that. You could watch he can go home and put on, you'd invite people around for supper and say, do you want to watch my pole positions? And it would go on for 2 hours.
Go on longer than the race, than a race.
Unbelievable.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
I know Lewis is, what is he, Damon? One of the most talented people to walk the earth.
Yeah, he's virtually, he's virtually Christ-like. He walks on water as well. Yeah. No, never knowingly under-hyperbolized.
But I watched that feature with Martin as well. And I actually came away thinking that Lewis doesn't really know how he does it. There were a few little gems in there about making sure you change gear at exactly the right time so you don't miss 1,000th of a second. But it's almost how I came away thinking he just does it.
He just, I know what you mean, because his attention to detail isn't like others in terms of he doesn't walk the track, he doesn't use the simulator. It surprised me that he's done maximum 20 laps on the sim in a year. And you would say, oh, well, it comes down to, such a hard work ethic. And of course he works hard, but I think you're right. I think it is instinctive.
It is.
And I learned more about qualifying from what Martin was saying than actually what Lewis was saying in a funny kind of way. And Martin hasn't actually had a pole position in Formula One. So it's just, it's interesting to just watch Lewis, not really hear, just watch him trying to articulate how he does it. And I think it, as you say, Pinks, it's just so natural. He just does it.
And he said at the end, Tom, that, you've got to find your own way. And he's found his own way. And that's why he's an artist, because he doesn't listen to what other people are wanting him to do. So, you asked him, he doesn't know what he does, but he knows what he doesn't do. He doesn't sit in a simulator for weeks on end, and he doesn't go and track walk, and he doesn't do things that he knows he doesn't want to do.
Doesn't want to waste energy on. That's how he put it, wasn't it? It was quite interesting.
Yeah. So and a lot of drivers haven't had, I think, a feel that they have to do what the team tell them, and so they give in to pressure, convention, and stuff like that. And Lewis has never done that. He's never compromised on. I mean, he's had with McLaren. There hasn't been another team that has wanted to control the drivers as much as McLaren. But of course, you look at the great drivers; they controlled themselves. Lauda, Prost, Senna. They weren't controlled by the team.
But I think Lewis had to leave McLaren to get the level of control he wanted, didn't he?
Agreed. Yeah, totally agreed. Yeah. Anyway, so that was fascinating, and I loved listening to that, and I love the fact that Lewis has found his modus operandi, and he set the rules for himself. Because as drivers, it's very easy to get pushed around, and you have to stand your own ground sometimes.
Talking of which, I'd like you to stand your own ground now with my favourite part of the show, which is Ask Damon. How do you feel about it? How do you feel about our MO?
I'm ready. Come on, hit me.
Okay, so we've got a couple of questions coming up. Here's our first clip.
Hi, Damon. This is Jeff calling from Atlanta, Georgia in the United States. I was wondering if you had an opinion about why racers from IndyCar do not make the transition to Formula One very often, but it seems that Formula One drivers may move over to IndyCar when they've lost their seats. Thanks.
Great question.
Jeff from Atlanta, fantastic question. Of course, it's following on from a couple of things that have happened, which is namely like Grosjean going over to IndyCar and doing quite well, but also having lost out his drive in F1. Will correct you on one thing, because Villeneuve came over from Indy, having won the Indy, and then came over and joined me as a teammate. So Jacques Villeneuve came across the channel and did it in reverse. Nigel did it the other way. He won the World Championship and then went over and won the IndyCar Championship. So we've had
Michael Andretti,
of course, but he didn't have quite a lot of success, You'd have to say Mario was more successful there. But, we've also had a couple of comments made about the potential of current IndyCar drivers and their, maybe they could come over to F1. And of course, Patricio O'Ward, what is it?
Pato
O'Ward. Pato O'Ward has been offered a test at Abu Dhabi because he did a deal with Zach. If he wins an IndyCar race, would he get a test? So he's going to come over and have a go. And he certainly looks like his win in Texas was fantastic, very brave driving. And so there's some talent over there.
There was a lot of chat after the second race of the season, wasn't there, St. Petersburg, about Colton Herta, son of racer Brian Herta, who won that race. And would he come to Formula One? And he went on record as saying, yeah, I'll come if I can get a Ferrari contract, actually. But I was chatting to Grosjean last week, actually, and I asked him, who has impressed you? What is the standard of driving like over there? And he said, do you know who's impressed me the most? He said Scott McLaughlin, who is the Aussie supercar champion who's gone over there and finished on the podium in his third race. He didn't say Scott Dixon. He didn't say Pato O'Ward. He didn't say Colton Herta, which I thought was interesting in itself.
Yeah. Is it a measure? That's the thing. I mean, I'm impressed by their...
Is what a measure?
The championship. You know, is it a measure of the circuits, the cars they're driving? Because F1 is looking for something which is... There's lots of really great drivers in F1, but the thing they're looking for is now coming down to the last couple of hundredths of a second between you and your teammate. I mean, it is such a fine margin, a relentless margin that you're looking for in F1. I do think that's where F1 is still the tougher test of ultimate driving ability.
And Jeff, final thought is that I don't think the Indy cars themselves are quite quick enough. Grosjean said they're like a GP2 car, a Formula 2 car. They've got 40% less power. And of course, it's a spec series. They haven't got the high downforce through the quick corners as well. So it is a massive step from IndyCar to these current Formula 1 cars, as Pato O'Ward is going to find out later in the year.
Okay, Damon, your next question.
Hey Damon, it's Umar here from Nottingham in England. Now, I've been a bit cheeky and sneaked in 2 questions here. So the first one, we all know how good you are on a race car, but you're also a pretty handy musician. So what's your favourite guitar? And following on from that, there's quite a few other budding musicians in the F1 paddock. So we've seen Lando Norris playing the drums and Lewis Hamilton playing guitar on his Instagram. So is there an F1 driver musical collaboration on the cards anytime soon? Absolutely loving the podcast, guys. Keep up the good work and cheers.
Umar, thank you for that question. Yes, well, we had, at one time, we had a kind of impromptu band that Eddie Jordan got going by having a truck that he brought to the British Grand Prix with all his cousins from Ireland. It seemed like who formed the backing band. And then after the Grand Prix, David Coulthard would get up there with a tambourine and Johnny Herbert with a triangle. And I'd get a few bars in with the guitar. So it was good fun. But all rock and roll.
I love Johnny had a triangle. That's
It was whatever you could grab basically on stage. And I've noticed that Lewis has been promoting his burgeoning skills on piano and guitar. His finger picking is quite good. It's coming along. And I didn't know that Lando Norris played drums. But it doesn't surprise me because they have to do quite a lot with their feet in the racing car and their hands. So
he doesn't play the drums. Yeah. He did it as a bit of fun before the start of the season. They were making this anthem together, him and Daniel, for Daniel's arrival at McLaren. And he loved it so much, he then went out and bought a drum kit. But I think it's a bit of a stretch to say he's a drummer.
Well, watch that space. Yeah. He's got time. He's still got time. I mean, it only takes a lifetime. I mean, the problem is, if you with social media now and Instagram, if you go on anything like brilliant musicians on Instagram, oh my God, there are these like 5-year-old kids who can play ridiculous stuff on guitar. There's so much talent out there. And, I know where I fit in the scheme of things with musicians. I'm probably about maybe in the bottom 5%. If I'm lucky. That's not to say there won't be a band or there couldn't be, but you have to be prepared. I think you probably need a very good backing band, and they take care of the real music. Right, my favourite guitar is my Stratocaster, which I got. There's a long story to it. Basically, Leo Sayer was a huge F1 fan and has been for years, and he managed to get me a free Stratocaster. Can you believe it? So I got this free Stratocaster, which is electric blue, beautiful thing. And then this is where I'm going to name drop massively, because I went to Jeff Beck for dinner once and he had a spare neck of his guitar lying around. I said, "You're using it?" He said, "No." I said, "Can I have it?" So I've got a Jeff Beck neck on my Stratocaster.
I thought Leo Sayer was a big enough name. That was a hell of a drop. And then you just took it up another level.
Well, I just move in these circles, don't I, Natalie? And so I'll come to the other big names later in the year, perhaps. But so that was given to me. And
how many guitars have you got?
Not that many. Only 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and there's some upstairs, 7, 8. I've got a sitar as well. Well, can I just say, don't ever get a sitar. Oh my God, there's about 1,000 strings on it, and they're always out of tune, and the pegs they never sit in place. You turn a peg, and the peg comes out in your hand, and it's just a nightmare. I mean, there's that great thing with the Concert for George, and it had Ravi Shankar came on, and in the Madison Square Gardens, we're talking about 1970 or something, and he spent 5 minutes tuning up, and everyone clapped at the end of it, and he said, well, if you like the tuning up as much as you like the show, we're going to be going all right. But it took him 5 minutes to tune up a sitar. Oh my God, nightmare.
Great question, Uma.
Great stuff.
So those were fantastic questions, and we love the fact that we can hear your voice. So if you want to send in some more questions, anyone out there, have a go. Don't forget, it's a voicemail to askdamonhill@gmail.com.
I'm so impressed with you and your bike ride, by the way. I think that's...
Well, you can talk. This is a man who cycled from John O'Groats to Land's End.
Hang on, but Damon, you've got a couple of years on me.
I have. You're right. But I've always had a couple of years on you. That's not going to change.
If I can just do a 100-mile bike ride in
you have to warm up. Time. You have to do a little bit of exercise, training. But
I'm really finding I have to warm up, by the way. My Achilles.
No.
I have to go and stand. When I run the track, I have to stand on the edge of the pit wall and just do that sort of up and down movement.
Well, it's probably the muscle. It's not the tendon. This is what everyone always does with tendons. They always think it's a tendon. It's not. It's the muscle. You have to stretch the muscle, not the tendon.
Right. Well, I just need to stretch everything, to be honest with you. And then I have to do it again when I've finished. I just can't nip out for a run anymore. It's the whole process. It's a whole process.
Stop moaning. You wait till you get to 60. I'm 60. It's not over, but it's definitely getting more difficult.
I wish you were coming to Monaco, because I always think the Friday of Monaco, the rest day, that's the time to get on a bike. And the roads are so much... Have you not found the roads are so much smoother in Europe than they are in the UK?
I found them much steeper. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, they are around Monaco.
They are unbelievable. It's only uphill, isn't it? Basically, if you go anywhere, it's up.
Nice. Well, I think that's the end of the show.
As always, it's been an absolute pleasure.
I could have chatted all day, actually. It's quite a good one, isn't it?
Have we got to do the titles, isn't it? The titles now or something?
Oh, yeah.
I can never remember. What is it, Tom?
The credits. Well, if I say F1 Nation is produced by F1, you've now got to say in association with Audio Boom, all right? Should we do that?
So I say F1 Nation is produced in association with Audio Boom.
Something like that. And I say by F1.
By F1. Okay, do you think they've got that?
I think we've nailed it.
And you, Tom, are just so smooth. You are a very smooth presenter.